In this section, we'll talk a bit about spatial relationships, how objects relate to one another. First of all, I just wanted to highlight the concept of location. As I mentioned in one of the previous lectures, the idea of location really has two different definitions of location: absolute and relative location. Absolute location refers to the pinpointed location that results from an XY position on the Earth's surface. Latitude and longitude, for example. We have the latitude and longitude of a place, we pinpoint its location, and we look at the meaning of that location and we analyze that location. That in and of itself doesn't give us the whole picture, though, because the true meaning and significance of location can often be understood through the idea of relative location. Relative location refers to the comparison of locations, and the situation of a location relates to the comparison between a location and the locations around it. So we start to think about situation or relative location in all kinds of contexts, such as the regional position of a place. And the relative location, by comparing places, starts to reveal important factors about how places interact, and we'll see that interaction as we go through the course. The spatial context as a whole, we start to think about things like the proximity of places. Located by what? What's the access like? And all these kinds of concepts that relate to how space has meaning. How space has meaning. We think about the relevance of co-location in terms of distinct factors being located in the same places. We think about two attributes that may be co-located. They're not always causal, but you certainly can find lots of examples of attributes where you find two things happening at the same place. And there seems to be a pattern to that. And so we want to investigate then, is it a causal pattern or not? And we get into ideas like the meaning of distance, direction, and we can start to then understand regionals and regions and spatial aspects of regions from the point of view then of measuring the weight and value of various activities going on in different places. So in chapter 2 of your book, the book talks a bit in more detail about concepts of spatial analysis that relates to the spatial context of data, how we understand neighboring concepts, and then the idea of spatial dependence. So this is driven by this simple question: what attributes might be contributing to changes in an object from one location to another? So we see certain characteristics like precipitation and air temperatures and forest patterns, in this case in the Great Lakes, some of the Great Lakes states. And how does location relate to that? In other words, across space the conditions change. Well, the conditions might change for lots of different reasons, but they're still spatially dependent, at least at that moment in time. And so one of the great values of spatial analysis is that it opens up the possibility then to start explaining why these factors like air temperature are spatially dependent. They're not fixed, but they're spatially dependent within the context of a given snapshot that we're looking at. And by opening up that idea of looking at things from a spatial perspective, we can then begin to answer in much more depth. And in the course we get much more into some of the details of the methods that are used in spatial analysis. And so the next section deals with spatial statistics in a little bit of detail and gives us some examples, at least to get you started, thinking about how to relate the concepts you'll be doing in the lab manual, starting with chapter 6, into the direct examples that tie to the basics of the spatial experience and spatial context.